Chapter 696. Perhaps it was the correct Marvel Universe. Time, 2022. Location, Marvel Universe, Earth, New York City. At that moment. Since the invasion of the alien forces led by Thanos, it has been 5 years in the blink of an eye. 5 years, it was neither long nor short. New York seemed to have worn away the pain of the past. The people of the new era continued to grit their teeth and move forward. After all, no matter how difficult the days were, life still had to go on. 5 years ago, after the Thanos battle in Wakanda, New York, and many other places ended. After the final statistics, the death toll was nearly 330,000 people. Although this number was appalling, if one knew that the other side was the Thanos battleship that destroyed countless planetary civilizations and was invincible in the Milky Way, this casualty rate could be described as a miracle for Earth. But no one was optimistic. At the end of the Thanos battle, as the symbol of peace and the Lord of Earth, Kale and Thanos gave their all in the final battle. The universe's top combat power and Earth's top combat power, the collision of the infinite raw stone against the infinite raw stone, the shock wave of the universe's energy alone broke through the barrier of the mirror dimension space, causing the destruction of the area within 20 miles of New York City. Among them, it also triggered a big phenomenon now known as flickering. Within the range of Earth, all creatures, including humans, either aged by 5 years or became younger by 5 years. That is, a pair of siblings who were not far apart in age may have the younger brother aged by 5 years and the older sister became younger by 5 years, reversing into a pair of siblings with an age gap of 10 years. This caused turmoil and chaos in Earth's society. The humans who stayed on Earth spent 3 years revising the laws, changing the rules and systems of schools and social occupations. The people of the new era gradually adapted. But the flickering phenomenon was not that simple. Not only was there a flickering of time, but there was also a flickering of space. Half of the humans on Earth disappeared out of thin air. Yes, they didn't die. They were just randomly sent to various places in the Marvel Universe. It could be the Sokka star that was full of interstellar garbage, or it could be the Milky Way Alliance, or it could be the God's domain that was now ruled by the goddess of death. As for why the humans on Earth knew this, it was because later, Captain Marvel, who was wandering the universe, returned, and Iron Man Tony Stark, they came to a conclusion after analyzing the universe's big data. Hence, the humans who stayed on Earth not only had to bear the pain after the battle and adapt to the change in age between themselves and the people around them, but they also had to look forward to their loved ones who might still be alive somewhere in the universe. Under the leadership of Nick Fry, SHELD, had announced a long time ago that they would send out wandering spaceships and probes to search for lost humans and bring them back to their homes on Earth. But the universe was too vast. Even with the help of Captain Marvel, Thor, and the Guardian of the Galaxy, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Therefore, the final result of the Battle of Thanos was, the global economy had regressed by 10 years, and the death toll was close to 330,000 people. Nearly 3.5 billion people had gone missing. Even after 5 years, they had only managed to find less than 100,000 humans. In addition to the cruel flickering phenomenon, Earth also lost its most important hero, the symbol of peace, Kale. The new history book of the various countries on Earth wrote, the symbol of peace, Kale, was born in 1921. He was a hero of World War II, the symbol of peace, the first emperor of the Kal country, and the last and only Lord of Earth. In 2018, he fought Thanos alone and died together with Thanos and the 6 infinite primordial stones. Age, 97. Kale's death was a heavy loss for the entire human race on Earth. It represented the end of an era. A supreme god had completely left us. He surpassed God in that battle and became the only one in the hearts of humans. It was also after Kale's sacrifice that a large number of heroes from the Avengers left, such as Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and so on. They faded from the public sight and no longer fought as superheroes. As a special supreme country on Earth, the Cow country continued to cultivate superhumans and new heroes. They would replace the old heroes to fight for Earth. August 13, 2022. This was Kale's birthday, and also the fifth symbol of Peace Memorial Day. In the central area of New York City, there was a large crater left behind by the impact of infinite energy. The crater had a radius of 5 kilometers, and it was bottomless. There were warning lines and fences around the crater that prohibited entry. On these long and rusty fences, there were flyers and letters. Some were looking for people, some were mourning, and some were offering blessings. Beside the fences, there were many memorial wreaths. The city buildings around the crater had been repaired, but this crater was the only one that was left untouched. This place became the place where the whole world mourned the symbol of peace. Every year, many surviving humans would come to the crater in New York to reminisce. In the morning, the sky was bright, but the empty and cold city of New York was lively. People with solemn and sorrowful faces walked on the streets, placing flowers and mourning around the crater. There was no reason for it. Scattered snowflakes fell from the sky. This was the first snow in New York this year. The snow was getting heavier, but it could not fill up the crater and the hole in people's hearts. Russell, Boots stepped on the snowflakes on the ground. A tall blond man in a leather jacket and a woman with short silver hair in a long trench coat walked side by side on the streets near the crater, looking at the people walking towards the crater. If someone observed carefully, they would be surprised to find that the man was Captain America, Steve Rogers, and the other was Black Widow, Natasha. Of course, they were no longer superheroes. Even if they were former superheroes who had retired. Steve suddenly stopped in the middle of the street. He let the snowflakes fall on his hair and shoulders, and looked in the direction of the large crater that people were surrounding. Natasha followed him and stopped to look. Due to the flickering phenomenon, New York had lost half of its human population, and some people had moved out of New York. As a result, countless buildings in the formerly prosperous New York City were abandoned and idle. It was hard to see even cars on the main road in the morning. New York was quiet, so quiet that only the faint sound of snow falling could be heard. "He's always like that," Steve suddenly said. His voice was low, with a hint of powerlessness and lamentation. Natasha didn't say anything. She knew who Steve was talking about. Steve continued, "He's always like that. He walks in front of everyone without saying a word. If you're not careful, you'll be completely left behind by him and stand at a height that no one can reach." "Yeah." Natasha nodded and smiled bitterly. "No one can do it better than him. Now, even if someone can do it better than him, it's impossible to surpass him." Steve's voice kept getting lower. His body trembled slightly and finally calmed down. "There's no Kale in this world anymore." Chapter 697. On the outskirts of New York, on the grass next to the lake and forest, there was a simple wooden duplex villa. Not many people knew that this was the home of the former Iron Man, Tony Stark. After the Battle of Thanos and the Blink incident, shortly after Kale's death, Stark Howard also passed away. The disheartened Tony Stark took off his Iron Man suit and officially married Pepper Boss. Half a year later, they had a daughter, Morgan Cal. Yes, his daughter Morgan did not take the surname, Stark, but took the surname of her godfather, Kale. In Tony Stark's words, Godfather was no less than his own father to him. And Godfather had no children in his life, so letting Morgan take his surname was also a kind of remembrance. This was something that Stark Howard had already approved when he was alive. The Stark family had joined Family Cal as early as World War II. Now that the name of the Stark family had disappeared, Family Cal continued, which was really good. At this time, it was still snowing lightly outside the wooden villa, and the fireplace was crackling with the sound of firewood. Tony, who was dressed in black casual clothes and had white hair on his temples, was sitting on the sofa in the living room on the first floor. He was playing with a steel helmet with his daughter, Morgan. His wife, Chili, was making lunch in the kitchen. The atmosphere was warm and harmonious. Suddenly, the doorbell of the wooden door of the villa rang, but there was no so-called artificial intelligence to remind them. Tawny and Morgan looked at each other and smiled. Then Tawny picked up Morgan and walked towards the door. Let's see who will come at this time. Maybe it's Uncle Happy. Morgan made a soft bell-like sound. He is now managing the affairs of Stark Industries. How can he have time to come? Tawny came to the door with Morgan in his arms and opened the wooden door. After seeing two people standing outside, Tawny was slightly surprised. Why are you here? What? Steve, who was standing at the door, teased. Can't I come over for lunch? Natasha also blinked and followed his words. Or, am I bothering you? You two are really. Tawny shook his head and stepped aside. Come in. Captain, Auntie. Morgan greeted them excitedly. Good girl. Natasha nodded, patted the snow on her shoulders, and walked into the warm house with Steve. Tawny, Steve, and Natasha sat. Tawny put Morgan on the ground and touched her little head. To your mother to make her 3 cups of coffee. Can I have 4 cups? Morgan asked slyly. Tawny nodded with a smile. Go ahead. Okay. Morgan skipped to the kitchen. This scene made Steve and Natasha smile. Tawny looked at Steve and Selena and asked seriously, I didn't expect you to come at this time. What's the matter? No. Steve shook his head and said softly, today is a little special. The two of us just suddenly wanted to come out for a walk. Yeah. Tawny's eyes dimmed. Today is Godfather's birthday. Natasha looked at him in surprise. Tawny, I thought you forgot, how could I forget? I just tried not to think about it. Tawny smiled bitterly. He leaned against the sofa and said meaningfully, I think the people outside must be mourning Godfather now. But I won't. Tawny. Steve looked at him solemnly. Tawny's eyes reddened and he continued, I don't think Godfather will die in battle. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. How can Godfather die? No matter what the situation is, he will resist it without a care. No matter what enemy he faces, he will suppress and kill them. Tawny's body trembled slightly. He clenched his fists and took a deep breath to calm his emotions. I'm not the only one who thinks so. I believe the cow country has always thought so. Actually, Steve sighed softly, I also don't think someone like Kale will die in battle. Even if he's going to die, it should be me who dies first. But 5 years have passed. Natasha said softly, we should all accept this. We should accept that we have lost the head of the family and try to recover the heavy losses from back then. I know. Tawny nodded slightly and looked at Steve and Natasha. In the past 5 years, although you no longer show up as heroes, you have been secretly assisting SHELD, contacting Captain Marvel and the Guardian of the Galaxy to find the Lost Ones. The Lost Ones. This was a new term in the past 5 years. It represented half of the humans who were teleported from Earth to other planets because of the Blink incident. Yes. Unfortunately, the results are minimal. Natasha said helplessly, the universe is vast and there are many humans. I'm afraid that even if we continue to search like this for a century, we won't be able to bring back even 1% of the lost ones. I knew that. Tawny was not surprised. After all, those who became lost ones in the past, including heroes such as Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Falcon, he had also analyzed them with big data. Not to mention ordinary people who did not have much combat power, even superheroes who were randomly sent to various areas of Marvel's 9 worlds could not be found after 5 years. It was impossible to find all the lost ones in one fell swoop unless they used the power of the 6 infinite primordial stones again. But those 6 infinite primordial stones were completely destroyed in the battle between Kale and Thanos. It was a dead end. The 3 people in the hall were silent until a ringtone broke the heavy silence. "This is Steve Rogers." Steve took out his flip phone from his pocket and put it to his ear. After listening for a while, the expression on his mature bearded face changed from solemn to surprised, and then to shocked. This surprised Tawny and Natasha. After a while, Steve put down the flip phone in his hand and looked at the 2 of them excitedly. "We might be able to get back everything we've lost, the lost ones, and even Kale." "What?" Tawny and Natasha looked at him in shock. On the other side, in the X-Men universe. Academy for Gifted Teenagers. The wooden door of the principal's office was suddenly pushed open. Professor X, who was sitting in a special wheelchair, looked up at the person who rushed into the room and said cheerfully, "What happened again? You're already so old, but you're still so impatient." Jean did not answer. Her beautiful eyes looked straight at Professor X. Her lips parted slightly, and she asked with a trembling voice, "Professor, tell me, has he been to the school recently?" Professor X was slightly taken aback. Obviously, he knew who Jean was talking about. He said with a smile, "It seems that you already know." "That's right, he came here once a month ago." "Did he ask you not to tell me?" Jean bit her lip and continued to ask. "You should know best why he did that," Professor X said calmly. Professor X said calmly, "He came suddenly and left quickly. I don't know where he is or where he will go." Jean's long blonde hair swayed. She turned around and ran out of the principal's office. "Jean!" Professor X looked at her figure and called out to her with telekinesis. However, Jean turned a deaf ear to him. She walked hurriedly, like a little girl who could not wait, and quickly left the school's teaching building. Jean. After a moment of silence in the principal's office, Professor X in the wheelchair suddenly smiled and muttered to himself, "You've missed out on 12 years. There's no need to continue lying to yourself." Chapter 698. X-Men Universe, Earth, Germany, Magneto's family. It was almost lunchtime. Ding dong. The doorbell of the house suddenly rang. Sitting on the sofa in the living room on the first floor, Magneto Eric cast a puzzled look at the door. Who's back? Wanda? Lorna? Or Pete? These kids don't bring their keys. Mrs. Nina came out of the kitchen and complained, but she still ran to open the door. When she opened the door and saw the person standing outside, Mrs. Nina couldn't help but be stunned. It was a very young and beautiful woman. Set off by her slightly curly golden hair, her fair skin was as lustrous as ivory. She had a pair of beautiful eyes that were as bright as sapphires. Her nose was tall and straight, and her lips were painted with a light cherry color. Coupled with her enchanting figure wrapped in a knee-length red dress, her slender waist, and her seductive curves, Mrs. Nina sighed inwardly. This was a beautiful woman who was youthful, mature, and intelligent. Even when she was young, she couldn't help but be jealous of her. However, why was this woman, who seemed to be favored by God, looking uneasy and expectant? Even her slender fingers were intertwined with each other anxiously. Could it be that another daughter has come to find me? Mrs. Nina's eyes became slightly dangerous. She knew her man well. When he was young, he was a playboy and had left many descendants all over the world. Well, excuse me. Mr. Eric, do you live here? The woman asked a little nervously, her voice pleasant. Sure enough. Mrs. Nina was about to ask Eric, but when Eric heard her voice, he immediately put down the newspaper and stood up. Looking at the blonde woman standing outside the door, Eric froze for a moment. Jean, why are you here? Jean nodded slightly and said with a smile, Professor X told me that you live here. What? So you're Professor X's student? After learning Jean's identity, Mrs. Nina immediately beamed with joy. She quickly opened the wooden door and invited Jean into the house. "Sorry to disturb you." Jean entered the villa politely. She spread her mind slightly and scanned the entire villa. But in the house, except for Eric and Mrs. Nina, there was only Anya, who was taking a nap in her room. There wasn't the person she was looking for. When she couldn't even find the last possible place, indescribable disappointment surged in her heart. A teardrop rolled down Jean's cheek. "Miss Jean, what's wrong with you?" Madame Nina's heart ached when she saw this. Although Jean was not her child, no one would be able to stop themselves from feeling pity for such a girl when she revealed such a sad expression. "It's nothing, I'm fine." The more Jean tried to restrain herself, the more her tears flowed. Looking at the weeping Jean, Eric seemed to have understood something. He sighed and said, "You're here for him, right?" Jean gently bit her lip and nodded. Just as Eric was about to say something, the door suddenly opened. Tian-Chi walked into the room and said, "I'm here to get lunch. My two disciples are really hard to teach each of them a lesson." When he saw Jean in the room, Tian-Chi subconsciously trembled and turned to leave. "Sorry to disturb you." "Stop." A powerful aura suddenly erupted from Jean, and her blonde hair danced wildly. Tian-Chi's body seemed to be locked by some kind of power, and he stood motionless at the door of the villa. "Old man." Jean stared at Tian-Chi coldly. She was a completely different person from the weak girl just now. "Where's my teacher? Where did you take him? I'm just a servant. How can I take my master anywhere?" Tian-Chi smiled bitterly. A faint golden light appeared on Jean's body. She threatened, "If you don't want to be turned into ashes by the power of the phoenix, then tell me where Teacher Caesar is." I'll tell you." Tian-Chi panicked. Although he had made great progress in the past decade or so, compared with the power of the phoenix, which could cut the universe apart, there was still a practical gap. "Master, I'm sorry, but I can only betray you." Tian-Chi muttered in his heart, "I'll let the master and disciples solve their own problems." In a remote mountain forest not far from Magneto's villa, there is a barrier shrouding it, and there is a giant pyramid located inside. On the altar platform, little Wanda and little Lorna of this world were training to control their own mutant abilities. Superman's clone Caesar sat on the platform as usual, bathing in the sun. He thought about how to break through this universe, re-enter the quantum space, and return to the Marvel universe where his main body was. "My strength should be enough. A full power attack should be enough to destroy the Earth. But to truly break through this world, I'll need the help of a purer power." Caesar thought of the power of the Phoenix. The power of the Phoenix was the pinnacle of spiritual power. It was enough to cut open the universe. If he let the power of the Phoenix cut open a hole, then combined it with Superman's full power punch, he might be able to break through the boundaries of the universe. What a pity. Caesar shook his head. He had already decided not to see Jean again. He was not from this world and would leave one day. Moreover, Jean had already grown up and had her own life. This was the best ending for her. Caesar stared blankly at the sun until the sound of Tian-Chi's teleportation came. But this time, it wasn't just Tian-Chi. There was also Jean. Caesar immediately came down from the platform. His eyes widened as he looked at Jean, who was standing beside Tian-Chi. Was he living in a dream? Jean also stared straight at Caesar. More than 10 years had passed, but her teacher was still exactly the same as she remembered. His appearance hadn't changed for more than 10 years, Tian-Chi. Caesar deliberately avoided her gaze and glared at Tian-Chi. "Master, it's not my fault. I really can't beat her, and I don't dare to fight." Tian-Chi bowed, full of grievances. These two bullied him all day long. "It's not his fault. I'm the one who's looking for you," Jean suddenly said. Why are you looking for me? Caesar touched the back of his head and smiled. I haven't seen you for more than 10 years. You've truly grown up. Now, you don't need my guidance anymore. You've truly graduated, Jean. Caesar sighed and felt lonely. At this moment, Jean took the initiative to run forward and threw herself into his arms. No, I still need your guidance. Jean looked up and looked at Caesar with a burning gaze. At such a close distance, she could no longer avoid his gaze. She said shyly and seriously, I want to continue learning from you. What is love? How to be a qualified wife? How to spend a lifetime with a person until death? Caesar trembled. He hugged Jean and exhaled softly. This is a lifelong lesson. Won't you regret it in the future? You won't drop out anymore? Of course. Jean's tears fell like pearls. She hugged him tightly and said, 13 years ago, after leaving you, teacher. Every day, every moment, I've regretted it. The ice in Caesar's heart completely melted. For the first time, he felt that he, an outsider, had established a true connection with the X-Men universe. How should he respond to this pure and passionate feeling? Caesar didn't say anything. He just hugged Jean tightly, leaned down, and kissed her lips. Looking at the two hugging and kissing, Tian-Chi solemnly stood in front of little Wanda and little Lorna. Not suitable for children. There might be another update today, but there should be a double update in the next few days. It would be over in about a week. End of chapter. Chapter 699. On this day. X-Men Universe, Earth. The entire cathedral in London, England was rented. The supreme leaders of some large countries, all the teachers of the genius youth, the former four horsemen of the apocalypse, Magneto's family, Jean's relatives, and some banquet bar owners, everyone came to participate in a grand wedding. In the grand and quaint main hall of the church, a group of guests dressed in suits or gowns basically filled all the seats, and some even stood in the open space on both sides. Magneto Eric rarely wore a formal suit to officiate a wedding. Since the groom's family was not present, Professor X Charles represented them. Under the gorgeous and soft lights of the church, and in the midst of the classical and pleasant orchestra music. The groom, Caesar, combed his hair into an adult's appearance and put on a handsome suit, held hands with Jean, who looked like she walked out of a fairy tale in a wedding dress. The two of them slowly walked from the red carpet at the gate to the high platform for the vows. The guests sitting below the stage looked at the two of them who were incomparably compatible with each other. Some of them had complicated expressions, while some of them were congratulating them. Among them, the ones with the most complicated emotions were, of course, the male teachers and students of the Genius Youth Academy. The goddess they chased after all those years was married just like that, and it was a bit difficult to sincerely congratulate them. Teacher Scott, aren't you going to try to snatch the wedding? This is your last chance. Some of the mutant male students who came to attend the wedding began to secretly encourage him. Radiation Eye Scott, who was standing in the last row of the main hall. In the Genius Youth Academy, the one who chased after Jean the most was Scott. From his school days to his working days, this was a well-known fact in the Genius Youth Academy. Snatch the wedding? I don't want to die. The corner of Scott's mouth twitched as he smiled bitterly. On the groomsmen's side were Wolverine Logan, Red Devil Azazo, Hank the Beast, Quicksilver Peter, and one of the former four horsemen of the apocalypse, Archangel. On the bridesmaid's side were Storm, one of the former four horsemen of the apocalypse, Spirit Butterfly, the first female leader of the CIA, and Magneto's three golden flowers, Little Wanda, Little Lorna, and Little Anya. In addition, there was Apocalypse to maintain order. Snatch the wedding in front of a dream-level lineup that could destroy the world? Snatch it with your life. Not to mention. Today's main characters, Caesar and Jean, were probably more powerful than everyone present combined. Professor X, who was sitting in a wheelchair, stared blankly at the newcomer walking up the stage. For a moment, he was in a daze, as if he was recalling that night many years ago. Little Caesar crashed into the courtyard of his house like a meteor. "My name is Charles." "Who are you?" "Hello, my name is Caesar. I'm from Marvel." That was the beginning of their story. Since then, they had become friends, teacher and student, and even family. "Now, are you thinking about the same thing as me?" Behind him, a familiar female voice suddenly sounded. Charles didn't look back. He knew that it was the shapeshifter Wuxia. He smiled and nodded, the corners of his eyes slightly moist. "Yes." On the wedding stage, Caesar and Jean stood face to face. Eric, who was next to him, seemed even more serious than when he assassinated the president. He held a book in his hand and asked seriously, "Are you willing to marry this woman? Love and be faithful to her, in poverty, sickness, or disability, until death. Are you willing?" "Of course, I am." Caesar nodded. Eric looked at Jean and said in a deep voice, "Are you willing to marry this man? Love and be faithful to him, in poverty, sickness, or disability, until death. Are you willing?" "I." Jean looked at Caesar, paused, and then smiled. "Of course I am. 13 years ago, I was already willing to do so. Then, congratulations on becoming husband and wife at this moment. I hope that you will be united forever." Eric raised his hands and gestured for the twins, Wanda and Lorna, to give them the rings. They put on the Mobius ring, and under the witness and blessings of everyone in the church, Caesar and Jean hugged and kissed each other. No matter what time and space they would go to in the future, Caesar knew very well that he could never leave Jean again, and Jean could never leave him. Therefore, they got married. It was abrupt and natural. At the end, the bride threw the bouquet. Jean threw the bouquet with her back to everyone. As soon as the bouquet was thrown out, Scott made the first move. He couldn't snatch the wedding, but he could at least snatch the bouquet, right? What Scott didn't expect was that Hank the Beast had the same idea as him. In order to snatch the bouquet, Hank burst out with the speed of an inhuman beast. He pounced on the bouquet. "Damn, I didn't see you work so hard in battle." Scott wanted to curse. Quicksilver Peter didn't have any intention of snatching it, but when he saw them make a move, his hands itched to use his ability. With his extreme speed ability, he could snatch the bouquet in the blink of an eye. At this moment, little Wanda and little Lorna made a move at the same time. They used the abilities they had recently mastered, not to snatch the bouquet, but to obstruct their brother's actions. The Archangel and Storm also unleashed a ball of metal feathers and a thunderstorm respectively, blocking Hank the Beast and Scott the Beast. At the same time, Azazo, Spirit Butterfly, and everyone else joined in the fight for the wedding bouquet. For a moment, the church hall was filled with demons. Fortunately, Apocalypse had activated a barrier in advance and enveloped them. Otherwise, if they were slightly affected, the entire church would probably explode on the spot. Thunderstorm, metal feathers, powerful thoughts, rapid afterimages, chaos magic, teleportation. An ordinary bouquet that had yet to land was like a small boat in a stormy sea, with the possibility of being destroyed at any time. But no one could snatch it immediately, and whoever was about to get it would be surrounded by others. Just like that, 3 seconds passed. The wedding bouquet finally drew a parabola and landed in someone's arms. Everyone in the hall stopped fighting at the same time, and the chaotic hall fell silent. Looking at the wedding bouquet in his arms, Professor X Charles was a little dumbfounded. He didn't snatch it. Caesar, who had been watching the show from the high platform, saw the bouquet's final owner and revealed a meaningful expression. "Congratulations, Charles." Wuxia, who was standing behind Charles, blushed slightly and turned to leave. "Professor, aren't you going to chase after her?" Jean gestured. "I'm already so old." Charles touched the back of his smooth head and smiled bitterly. But under the encouragement of everyone in the hall, including Magneto Eric, he gritted his teeth, manipulated his wheelchair with both hands, and chased after Rui Wen's figure nimbly. As everyone laughed happily, Caesar and Jean looked at each other and smiled. Reality proved. Love could transcend age, identity, space-time, and even everything. It was the strongest and greatest ability. With a sense of belonging here, Caesar felt that his journey in the X-Men universe had ushered in the end at this moment. It didn't matter what happened in the future. The important thing was who was by his side. Chapter 700. Ever since Superman's clone Caesar and Jean got married. In the forest next to Magneto's family, on the 1,000-meter-tall pyramid platform, there was a new wooden villa. Caesar finally took root in the X-Men universe. He no longer thought about how to return to the Marvel universe where his main body was, but enjoyed the years he spent here. Until, 3 years of such peaceful days had passed. On this day, the sun was shining brightly and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. On the pyramid platform outside the villa, Apocalypse was like an old butler as always. She bent down slightly and taught Wanda and Lorna, who had grown up to be slender and elegant. It was just that the twins, who had now completely mastered their abilities, were now able to contend with Apocalypse, who had multiple mutant abilities, for a short period of time. Although Apocalypse was only holding back a little, it was still amazing enough. After all, in the X-Men universe's power ladder, Caesar and Jean were the only ones who had never been seen before, and then there was Apocalypse, who could fight against all mutants alone. Wanda and Lorna could compete with Apocalypse, which meant that no one in the X-Men universe could be their enemy except for Caesar's group. While Apocalypse was teaching Lorna and Wanda in this universe. In the hall on the first floor of the villa, Caesar, who was wearing home clothes, was half lying on the soft sofa. He sometimes watched TV, sometimes looked at the beautiful girls practicing their mutant abilities outside the window, feeling a little bored. Caesar was yawning with his mouth wide open when a fair hand suddenly reached out and put the peeled fresh orange meat into his mouth. Caesar's eyes narrowed slightly. His big hand reached out to the side and pulled a voluptuous body wrapped in a red dress into his arms. "Stop fooling around, the children are still outside." The stunning blonde wife scolded and slapped away Caesar's hand that was naturally caressing her butt. "Close the door, they can't see." Caesar didn't think much of it. The hand that was slapped away started to move up and down again. "They can't see. But if you stay in your room for a day and a night like before, who wouldn't know?" Jean said grumpily. "Ahem, it's my fault that I have good stamina." Caesar felt a little helpless. In the end, he stopped his hands and held the adult version of Jean. If he had known earlier, he would have gone overseas for a vacation. Looking at the aggrieved Caesar, Jean bit her lower lip, lowered her head, and said softly, "Why don't we go back to our room?" Caesar's heart warmed. He smiled and comforted her, "Forget it, I'm just bored." "Do I look like someone who indulges in debauchery?" Jean kissed him gently and blinked. "Yes. Watch how I teach you a lesson tonight." After Caesar's words made Qin Lian blush, he looked out the window again. However, his gaze wasn't focused on Tian Chi or Wanda. Instead, it was focused on the blue sky. Qin didn't say anything. She quietly looked at Caesar's handsome face. As if she knew what he was thinking, Qin felt a slight pain in her heart. She took a deep breath and asked softly, "Are you thinking about your original world again?" "Ah." Caesar was startled. He looked into Qin's sapphire eyes and nodded hesitantly. Ever since they got married, Caesar had told Qin about the other world he came from, the Marvel Universe. Caesar hugged his wife and said with a smile, "After all, there are still powerful enemies there that haven't been dealt with. But with my original body and Yutong and the others, it should be fine." Qin could tell that Caesar was comforting himself. His doppelganger and original body were one. If he was worried now, wouldn't it mean that something had happened to his original body? Qin rested her head in Caesar's arms. She seemed to have finally made up her mind. Caesar. I also think that it's too boring to stay in this world. Caesar trembled and couldn't help but ask, you mean, I'm already very touched that you were able to accompany me here for 3 years. But a man like you shouldn't be imprisoned in this world, Qin said. But that's not fair to you, Caesar said with a wry smile. You're wrong. Qin shook her head and said firmly, as long as I'm with you, even if I have to travel through time and space, I don't mind. Qin. Caesar hugged Qin tightly. He was extremely touched. With a wife like this, what more could he ask for? Then, it's decided, with the person he loved, no matter the cost, just to pursue the Marvel Universe again. In the next few days, Caesar and Qin went to their relatives and friends to say goodbye, saying that the two of them would be going on a long trip. Most people, such as Qin's parents, only sent their blessings for a safe trip. Only a few people, such as Professor X and Magneto, knew that they would never see each other again after this farewell. After saying goodbye one by one. The morning of the 3rd day. Crack. The 1,000-meter-tall giant pyramid was like a mechanical box. It collapsed and deformed layer by layer, preserving the wooden villa built by the newlyweds inside. Together with a large number of supplies, it was taken back by Apocalypse into the space controlled by his mutant ability. The 100-year period of the master-servant contract had not yet passed, so Caesar would naturally take Apocalypse with him wherever he went. Moreover, if he left with Qin, Apocalypse would be the #1 combat power in the X-Men universe. He was really worried. In the end, only Magneto's family sent Caesar and the other two off. Brother Caesar, are you really going to leave this world with sister-in-law? I really can't bear to part with you guys. Wanda and Lorna's eyes were red as they looked at Caesar and the other two who were about to leave. Their expressions were full of reluctance. All good things must come to an end. You've all grown up. After we leave, this world will be in your hands to protect. Caesar smiled and reached out to touch their heads. But, Wanda and Lorna still wanted to persuade Caesar to stay. At this time, Magneto coughed and said in a deep voice, "Okay, if you have enough strength in the future, you can also go to other universes like Caesar." Wanda and Lorna looked at each other and said in unison, "We will definitely do our best. Brother, see you later." Quicksilver's eyes were also red. He just looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle to hide his embarrassment. See you later. As the eldest son of the family, take care of your parents and sisters. Caesar patted Quicksilver on the shoulder. This time, Quicksilver couldn't help it anymore and just wiped away his tears at supersonic speed. After bidding farewell to Magneto's family, he only let them watch from the foot of the mountain. Caesar and Qin went to the top of the mountain, and Apocalypse also stood guard. Looking at Caesar and the other two standing hundreds of meters high on the mountain, Quicksilver couldn't help but ask, "Father, traveling through time and space, crossing the dimensions of the universe, can this really be done?" Magneto hugged his wife and held his youngest daughter Anya, and said, "I don't know if it can be done by human power. But if even Caesar can't do it, then no one in the world can." On the top of the mountain. Qin, Apocalypse, do as I say. Caesar's eyes bloomed with a strong light, and his body surged with an invincible aura. He clenched his right fist tightly, and the condensed power was so substantial that the surrounding air trembled. Understood. Qin opened her hands, and her red hair fluttered wildly. She entered the peak of her mutant ability, the Fire Phoenix state, and wrapped Caesar's fist with a thought that was enough to cut open the universe. That's it. Caesar took a deep breath, still accumulating power. After countless previous experiments, Caesar's full-strength punch was enough to change the map of the Earth, but it still couldn't break through the X-Men universe. He had always thought that his strength was not enough, but later he thought it through. It was not that his strength was not enough, but that he was missing something. With a punch, even if he controlled it well, the power would still spread infinitely, forming a shock wave that could not be concentrated at one point in the void. And now with the help of Qin, and with the blessing of her extraordinary mind, the power can be completely concentrated in one place. The strongest power, plus the strongest mind, if this can't break through the spacetime barrier, then Caesar can only honestly develop Ant-Man's PIM particle technology. Whether we can go back or not depends on this punch. Letting Apocalypse prepare to travel at any time, Caesar raised his right fist wrapped in golden flames and slammed it directly into the sky above his head. Gotcha! This time, there was no shock wave spreading, no sonic boom, and the earth did not tremble at all. But the void was like glass, breaking open a hole that allowed people to pass through. The X-Men universe was pierced. Chapter 701. We failed, 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 we failed. We didn't meet Kale in the time and space we went to. 2020. Perhaps it was the correct Marvel universe. Earth, New York, New York, the Avengers' new base. On an instrument platform equipped with a very futuristic sense of technology, heroes wearing the improved version of Ant-Man and the uniform tight combat suit with the Aegis logo stood. Among them, as one of the leaders of the Avengers, Iron Man Tony Stark, Colonel Rhodes wearing an old version of the original Iron Man suit, Thor with a big beer belly, Ant-Man Scott, who had not changed much from before, Spider-Man Parker, who looked a little more like an adult, Hulk Banner, Hawkeye Clinton with frosty white hair, Quicksilver Peter who looked a lot more mature and steady, and Scarlet Witch Wanda, who was as slender and graceful as ever. These were basically all the heroes in the reverse. The present plan. As for the other superheroes, such as Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and other high-end combat forces, they were constantly on the move for the aftermath of the battle between Kale and Thanos and could not rush back to participate. As for Lucy and the others in the Cal country, they had no idea about the plan that the Avengers were currently carrying out. After all, there were only so many PIM particles left, and Ant-Man could not send a large number of people to the past. The members of the Avengers were also worried that those people in Family Cal were too obsessed with Kale. If they knew that they could see Kale again, they might do something reckless. The veteran heroes of the Avengers also discussed that when the plan here was officially successful, they would let Wanda and Quicksilver inform the Cal country. But they failed. Their desperate plan, which was their last hope, still failed. The heroes who returned to the present time and space from the past silently looked at each other, their faces filled with loneliness, grief, and confusion. Their plan had been laid out in great detail. Through the remaining PIM particles and the Ant-Man's modified battle suit, he shrank into the subspace and traveled back to the time before the battle between Thanos and Kale. He returned to the time and space to do only one thing. Collect the Infinity Primordial Stone and bring it back to the present time and space. Then, through the artificially created Infinity Glove, shoot out the finger that contains the power of the universe, and bring back the dead Kale and half of the humans that were randomly teleported out of Earth. This was a mission that had to be completed on the surface. Only by receiving the power of the infinite primordial stone could it be possible to reverse the current situation of time and space. But in fact, every hero who returned to the past, especially Tawny, Wanda, and the others who had deep ties, wanted to see Kale again, even if it was the Kale from the past. Furthermore, the past Kale had already possessed several infinite origin stones. Finding the past him was the first priority. But, the members of the Avengers who acted separately went to the past in 2008, 2010, and 2012, but they couldn't find any trace of Kale. Why? Tawny frowned and looked around at the people who returned to the spacetime shuttle platform. Why didn't we meet Godfather in the past? Is this a space-time bug? Mr. Stark. Spider-Man took a deep breath and said, "Could it be that you remembered the time wrong?" "That's impossible." Tawny shook his head and said, "I remember it very clearly, and I can't remember it wrong. Godfather left the Earth after World War II and returned in 2008, the year I was attacked by terrorists. I still remember that he was driving a car at that time, and he also blackmailed me, who had escaped. Even if you remembered the time wrong, it shouldn't be like that." Wanda, who had just returned from 2010, said, "I was in New York in 2010 and not only did I not find Kale, but I also couldn't find Yutong. Even Family Cal and Cal Country are unknown. I met the past Alpha Centauri." Banna, who had been to the 2012 space-time, scratched his head and wondered. "I asked her about Kale, and she didn't know anything. It's not the kind of deliberate concealment, but in her knowledge, there is no such character as Kale at all. In the history of the past spacetime since World War II, there has never been anything about Kale." Quicksilver couldn't help but say, "This is too strange. It seems that Kale doesn't exist in other spacetime except for our current spacetime. Even the past doesn't exist." Nebula on the side also remained silent. She knew that Thanos still existed in the past spacetime, but there was no trace of the strongest man on the Earth. They didn't know. In the final battle with Thanos, Kale merged with the power of the infinite original stone and became the only existence. Whether it is the future, the past, or the parallel spacetime, Kale will no longer exist. And what would the Marvel spacetime without Kale be like from the beginning? That's right, it's the original work. After all, Kale is a traveler. Because of his intervention, since World War II, the Marvel spacetime here has been separated from the original work and has undergone tremendous changes. The Marvel spacetime in the past, without the intervention of Kale, is the world in the original work. Therefore, they have not been able to find Kale. And people and things closely related to Kale, such as Family Cal, symbol of peace, Logan, Yutong, Lucy, Sakuragi. These naturally no longer exist in the past spacetime. Tawny quickly cheered up and said in a deep voice, "No matter what. Although we didn't find the Kale and Godfather in the past, we have collected the infinite original stone separately. Yes, for the original spirit stone of the past, Natasha's life was also sacrificed." Clinton smiled bitterly. Hearing what he said, everyone was silent again, and everyone clenched their fists. This time, they really failed. They failed to find Kale in the past spacetime, and lost Natasha, and more importantly, all 6 infinite original stones have not been collected. The biggest reason is still Kale. After all, in the Marvel spacetime without Kale, the infinite original stone would have existed, and various variables and deviations have occurred, causing the heroes who returned to the past spacetime to feel very uncomfortable. Some teams even stayed for more than half a month before they finally collected the target original stone. Despite this, they only collected 5 infinite original stones. The last infinite original stone is space. That's right, it's the original space stone. In the knowledge of the members of the Avengers, this original stone has always been with Kale, and they only needed to find him when they returned to the past. But now, they didn't find him, and naturally, they didn't get the original space stone as they wished. And without the original space stone, they couldn't make the snap of the finger that reversed the universe. By the way, Mr. Stark. Little Spider-Man was the first to break the silence and looked at Tony Stark. "You said that Captain Steve didn't return here with you. Instead, he used the Pym particles that should have returned and jumped to a more past spacetime?" "That's right." Tawny nodded and said, "We couldn't find Godfather in 2008, and we couldn't find the original space stone. So Steve decided to go back to World War II and try to find Kale or get the original space stone there. Then get the Pym particles in the initial research and development site of SHELD, and then return to the present. It seems that we can only pin our hopes on the captain. I hope he can succeed." Spider-Man's face was solemn, and he spoke out for everyone. Among them, only Nebula still looked calm, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 702. The only Marvel universe from tens of thousands of years ago. Kale secretly guided the young Odin to sit on the throne of God's realm and shape the rules of the universe into 7 infinite stones. He used the Stone of Power to induce the monstrous slaughter in the 9 lands, the Stone of Soul to open the wonderful legend of the universe, the Stone of Space and Stone of Reality to stabilize the position of God's realm, and the Stone of Mind to lock the fate of Thanos' family. Another 7 years passed. Due to the death and injury of the powerful giant clan, coupled with the beginning of the suppression of the prosperous God's realm to maintain the order of the border, the 9 lands of Marvel, which had been killing for a long time, finally ushered in an unprecedented peace. After Kale and Yutong explored the universe of the 9 lands of Marvel, they returned to the original planet and lived a shameless, ordinary life. But from time to time, the two of them would bring Venom, the incarnation of Star Swallower, to devour stars and galaxies, pull some ancient creatures with eternal life to drink tea, and throw a collapsed region outside the 9 lands, so that the ancient Marvel universe's time and space would be more stable and balanced. On this day, at the end of the 9 lands of Marvel, even the stars here don't twinkle, there is only darkness and silence. Only one place was special and was not affected by the rules of the universe. On a planet that was glowing with a divine halo, there was a luxurious mansion in the center. At this time, in the artificial park in the backyard of the mansion, spring was in full bloom, birds were singing, flowers were fragrant, and the breath of life was rich and vigorous. No one could imagine that this place was located in the dark and silent border area of the universe. Pawn forward. Jump elephant. In a white courtyard surrounded by flowers and plants, 2 people were sitting and playing chess. One of them was a middle-aged man with white hair and wearing a strange starry sky uniform. At this moment, his eyes were wide open as he stared at the chessboard below his eyelids. Beads of sweat kept sliding down his forehead, as if he was racking his brains to think of a countermeasure. As for the person sitting in front of him, it was a handsome young man. Every strand of his bright hair was like golden silk. His eyes were golden fragments that contained holiness and majesty. There were faint flames rising and burning in his pupils. Even though he was wearing a simple white casual t-shirt and jeans, he was still the center of this world. If the members of the Avengers who traveled back in time were here, they would be shocked speechless when they saw him. Wasn't this young man the Kale they were looking for but couldn't track down? "Hi Empyrean, you're going to die again." Kale spoke in a relaxed and simple tone. Holding the chess piece with 2 fingers, he directly killed Gao Tianzuan, who was sitting opposite him. This. Venerable Gao's eyes widened. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Finally, he shook his head and sighed. "So that's how it is. I lost again. I thought I was on the 5th floor, but who would have thought, no. The chessboard you set up is indeed the 5th level." Kale blinked and smiled. "Unfortunately, I'm in the atmosphere." Venerable Gao was speechless. As a founding member of the Marvel Universe who had lived for who knows how many years, if it was another creature who dared to beat him in the game, they probably wouldn't exist. However, the man sitting opposite him was an exception. Having seen with his own eyes how Kale pinched the invincible giant patriarch to death, Venerable Gao knew very well that if he really had such thoughts, the one who would die would definitely be him, even if he had a near-immortal body and life force. "I really can't help it. I lost to you again." Venerable Gao sighed and leaned back slightly. His eyes inadvertently fell on the small round table next to Kale. In the fruit basket, a few apples were placed next to a simple and luxurious golden crown. The biggest difference from the design of other crowns was that the golden crown had 6 empty slots that should have been inlaid with gems. Venerable Gao, who had infinite knowledge of the universe, of course knew the power contained in the crown. A trace of eagerness and extravagant desire appeared in his eyes, but it quickly dissipated. As if reading Venerable Gao's mind, Kale casually said, "What? If you want it, I can give it to you. For me? Venerable Gao swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared at the crown. In the end, he forced himself to close his eyes with an uncomfortable expression. He sighed. Forget it, I don't have the qualifications to have it. Even if I got it, it would be a waste. I didn't expect you to see it so quickly. Kale smiled indifferently. I've always been greedy. But, it's really too. Venerable Gao smiled bitterly, but found that he couldn't find the right words to describe the crown that Kale casually placed. He thought for a moment and asked in a deep voice, I want to know, what kind of thoughts did you have in mind when you created it? What kind of thoughts? Kale shrugged and said, I originally wanted to create a divine artifact for Odin. But later, I found that I overdid it, so I didn't give it to Odin. Odin is indeed good, the #1 divine king of all time. Venerable Gao praised. His gaze fell on the crown again and he shook his head. But, he is indeed not qualified to wear this crown. Venerable Gao couldn't think of anyone else besides Kale who could wear this crown. At this time, a beautiful black figure came out of the mansion. It was a woman who could be called a peerless beauty in all aspects. She had long black hair and a black dress wrapped around her graceful body. She was like a black rose that bloomed in the universe of the 9 worlds. Yutong had a smile at the corner of her mouth. She walked elegantly and brought over 2 cups of fragrant coffee. Venerable Gao didn't dare to look directly at her and slightly turned his face to the side. Thank you for your hard work. Kale smiled and took his cup of coffee. Yutong put the other cup on the table in front of Venerable Gao. Yutong smiled faintly. She was about to reply to something, but she suddenly frowned and covered her lips in disgust. What's wrong? Kale looked at her in surprise. I'm fine. Although Yutong said this, she hurriedly turned and ran away. What's wrong? Kale watched her leave and felt even more strange. With Yutong's ability and physical fitness, she shouldn't be sick or injured. Lord Kale. Venerable Gao finally couldn't hold it in and said, she should be pregnant. Pregnant? Kale's hand trembled and he almost dropped the cup of coffee. It can't be wrong. I have a special perception ability. As soon as she approached, I perceived another tiny life. Venerable Gao explained patiently. He was a little happy. He didn't expect that the great existence in front of him would be slower than him. Kale was silent. It's not that he didn't notice. It's just that the stronger the strength, the more perfect the genes, the harder it is to give birth. For example, the elders of the universe like Venerable Gao, after millions of years, still don't have a descendant. Ivan of the celestial god race freely paired with tens of thousands of women of different races, and finally succeeded in giving birth to a son with a human woman. And now Kale's genes have long surpassed the limits of this universe, and the probability of conceiving his child is too small, so he directly ruled out the result of Yutong's pregnancy before. It wasn't until now that he was completely sure that Yutong was pregnant. Chapter 703. After learning that Yutong was pregnant, Kale was unable to calm himself down. Heavenly Venerable Gao, you can go now. This was clearly an order for him to leave. Understood, I'll be going now. Heavenly Venerable Gao hurriedly stood up. He didn't want to stay here any longer. Don't forget what you promised me, Kale reminded. Heavenly Venerable Gao's lips twitched slightly. Of course I won't forget. In a year, I'll enter the nothingness. No matter how much time passes, I won't step out of the nothingness until the person you're referring to arrives. Kale nodded. He waved a hand, and Heavenly Venerable Gao flew backward into a spatial vortex. He was forcibly teleported away from this planet. Kale silently entered the first floor of the residence. He discovered that Yutong was wearing an apron like a lovely wife as she cooked lunch in the kitchen. His heart warmed as he stepped forward and hugged the beautiful woman's soft body from behind. Kale gently placed his hand on Yutong's lower abdomen. He could feel the life that was beginning to develop within her body. "Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid that you wouldn't like it." Yutong bit down on her lip hesitantly. "How could that be? I'm more than happy. Who wouldn't like their own child?" Kale was speechless. He gently stroked her lower abdomen, allowing Yutong's body to completely relax. "That's great." Yutong rested her head on Kale's chest as a blissful smile appeared on her face. "I have a feeling that it's a boy. Then it must be a healthy and handsome boy." Kale smiled, but his voice was filled with certainty. "Of course, he is our child." Yutong blinked her eyes playfully. A child with his genes was naturally not a mediocre mortal. Golden flames flowed through his bloodline. The universe's elders, the giant race, and the god spirit race couldn't be compared to him in terms of nobility. "Right." Kale seemed to have thought of something. He flipped his hand and summoned the golden crown from the card drawing space. It was a crown that even a high Empyrean would covet. "This is..." Yutong looked at the crown in Kale's hand and naturally recognized what it was. "Just treat it as a toy for the unborn child." As Kale smiled, he placed the crown against Yutong's lower abdomen. Then, something magical happened. The crown turned into a golden stream of light and gently merged with Yutong's lower abdomen. Yutong said helplessly, "You're spoiling him too much. Boys can't be spoiled." In this way, this unborn child was destined to become a king. Because he was born a king. Kale smiled indifferently. No matter how much he spoiled his own child, it was fine. "Kale," Yutong placed her hands on her lower abdomen and whispered, "I miss Lucy and the others." "Me too." Kale thought for a while and nodded. "Now that the Marvel Universe has been completely stabilized, it's time for us to go back. There was one last thing left." Of the 6 infinite primordial stones that stabilize the chaotic universe, 5 of them already have places to be placed, and now there was only one primordial stone left. "Wait for me to go somewhere. After I come back, we will leave here and go to the Marvel Universe where we should have existed." After Kale comforted Yutong, he went directly to the blue planet of the Milky Way galaxy, located in the human world of Marvel. Earth. It was just the Earth of tens of thousands of years ago. Kale came here alone. The current Earth was still in the Ice Age. Everywhere was a world of ice and snow, and frost was drifting down. At this time, human civilization had not yet been born. Kale, who was wearing casual summer clothes, was out of place here. He stood on the top of a snow mountain and released his extraordinary spiritual perception. Soon, he found what he was looking for somewhere on Earth. His body flickered and disappeared from the snow mountain. The next moment, he came to the other side of the Earth's territory and appeared in front of the entrance of an iceberg cave. This cave was obviously excavated artificially. There was a flickering fire inside, and there was a bonfire. 3 or 4 ape-like humanoid creatures huddled together for warmth. They were wearing furry animal skins and holding spears made of stone and wood in their hands. Seeing Kale appearing at the entrance of the cave out of thin air, they were stunned at first, then they got up in a hubbub and knelt in front of Kale in fear. Their hands were constantly worshipping, and their mouths were sobbing in unclear language. These should be the origin of human ancestors. Looking at them treating him as a godlike existence, Kale smiled. In fact, this is not bad. Kale took a fancy to a young primitive man among them and used his psionic ability to signal the other party to come to him. Although the young primitive man was terrified, he still staggered and knelt in front of Kale under the push of his tribesmen. "Your spiritual power is not bad. I choose you." Kale looked at the young primitive man and pointed 2 fingers at his forehead. In his unique perspective, more than 10 ability cards flew into the young primitive man's body. Now, Kale could use his ability to draw cards to the limit. Not only could he draw the ability cards of the other party instantly, but he could also directly give the other party a certain amount of ability cards. Method of creating hanging ring, spell, portal, spell, mirror dimension, after teaching part of the sorcerer's spells, as well as some basic knowledge and abilities, to the young primitive man. Kale retracted his finger and said in a deep voice, later. You will be the first guardian of Earth. You will support human beings and not let Earth be destroyed by supernatural beings. The young primitive man nodded, not fully understanding. And this? Kale opened his right hand. In his palm, there was a green gem. That was the primordial stone of time. This stone will suppress the fate of Earth and human beings. When Odin sends the primordial stone of time to Earth, under the subtle influence of the primordial stone of time and space, Earth will become the center of the Marvel Universe 10,000 years later. The young primitive man solemnly took the primordial stone of time. Until Kale left, he was still kneeling on the snow. After that, he will become the first sorcerer to lead the rise of human beings, fight against nature and other animals, and leave behind some incredible ancient civilizations. Then, this primordial stone will eventually fall into the hands of a sorcerer named Alpha Centauri in the future. At that time, another legend will rise again. This was the reincarnation arranged by Kale. At this point, after repairing the chaotic Marvel Universe, his duty as the creator was completed. Kale, Yutong, and their unborn child will be like Caesar in the X-Men universe, embark on the return journey. Chapter 704. Failed, I Still Failed. Marvel's World War II universe, the German battlefield of World War II. As far as the eye could see, the hills and bases that had been bombed into a wasteland were charred black. Corpses of soldiers were everywhere, and blood had dyed the ground dark red. The air was filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder and blood. A man with a shield covered in blood was lying on an overturned tank. If it wasn't for the iconic American uniform, no one would be able to identify him. Yes, he was Steve Rogers, Captain America from the future. In order to track down the missing Kale and the Space Stone, he consumed the Pym particles on the return journey and traced back all the way to the Dark World War II. Unfortunately, there was still no sign of Kale here. Because of the different history of Marvel, the Space Stone could not be found smoothly, and there were no clues about the Pym particles. Failed. This time it was a real failure. Steve put down the vibrating gold round shield on his left hand and gasped for breath, looking at the sky washed gray by the smoke, and his heart burst with an uncontrollable sorrow. He blamed himself for not being able to get the Space Stone and failing to live up to the expectations of the Avengers. What made him even more sad was that he really couldn't see Kale anymore. The man who walked in front of him all the way from the UA base, the man who said to him that their names were bound to be famous in the world, the man who had an invincible posture before and after he was frozen. It's okay if I lose, but you will never lose, brother. Steve closed his eyes, and a sparkling flash slid down from his face. Maybe this is the end of the story, right? A dream of World War II, and then a dream of World War II. As if nothing had happened, and as if a lot of things had happened. No, it shouldn't be like this. Steve opened his eyes, he gritted his teeth, his exhausted body struggled, and stood up little by little with the vibrating gold round shield. If the story ended here, it would be a pity. You must think so too. Steve stood alone on top of the tank. In his daze, he seemed to see a familiar and tall figure. She was standing in front of him, waving at him to keep up with her pace. Merry-go-round? Steve rubbed his eyes with his right hand, and his vision became clearer. In addition to the familiar tall figure, there was also a black figure standing beside him. What are you waiting for? Kale smiled and stretched out his hand. It's time to go back. Steve froze for a moment, but without hesitation, he held Kale's hand. As always. Perhaps it is the correct Marvel Universe, the Marvel Universe where Kale first arrived. 2020, the original location of the Avengers was now the ruins of war. Thousands of meters in the sky, an interstellar battleship that was even larger than a city was suspended in the air, casting a large shadow over the sky. In the middle of the ruins, a majestic and domineering figure immediately sat on a stone. In front of him was a space-time travel platform, and behind him was a dense group of alien soldiers and interstellar beasts. The members of the Avengers, including Iron Man Tony Stark, were more or less injured. They fell to the ground beside them and were imprisoned by the surrounding chains and land. "Master, this should be the imitation Infinity Glove they made to reverse the present." Ebony Throat smiled and knelt down on one knee, offering a technological imitation of the Infinity Glove, together with 5 Infinity Stones inlaid on the glove, to the domineering figure sitting on the stone. "Very good, very good." Thanos put down the double-edged machete and put the imitation Infinity Glove on his left hand. Seeing this scene, the Avengers were even more desperate. They were waiting at the base for Captain to bring back the dimensional stones, but they didn't expect Nebula to suddenly betray them and open a space-time portal to send Thanos' fleet from the past of 2008. Now in the Avengers, Captain America didn't return, and most of the high-end combat power wasn't there. Thor had become a fat otaku, so how could he be a match for Thanos and Thanos' generals? Even before the support from the Cal country, Captain Marvel, and Doctor Strange arrived, all the superheroes in the base were defeated, and the imitation Infinity Glove and 5 Infinity Stones were taken away. This time, it was really over. Last time, Kale blocked Thanos. Who could it be this time? Godfather. Tawny closed his eyes in pain. There's still one more. Thanos looked down at a groove on the Infinity Glove and asked in a deep voice. Nebula stepped forward and explained, "Steve hasn't returned from the past. It should be in his hands." "Then let's wait a little longer." Thanos wasn't in a hurry. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the space-time portal in front of him. At this time, Thanos suddenly looked up at the sky, and the generals and subordinates behind him looked up as well. They saw a cool stream of light descending from the sky and piercing through the interstellar battleship. It then landed valiantly beside the imprisoned heroes. It was Captain Marvel. The members of the Avengers were energized. Then, several portals of different sizes opened. The Cal country's combat power led by Lucy, the sorcerers led by Doctor Strange, and the Wakanda's combat power led by Black Panther. The surviving heroes of Earth all appeared. After all, only Kale died in that battle, and the heroes of the Avengers basically survived. Thanos. Lucy exuded a white chill, and her beautiful ice-blue eyes reflected the standing Thanos. "For Kale, I'll definitely kill you." "Who's Kale?" "But forget it, I don't need to know." Thanos wore a glove with 5 raw stones on his left hand and a double-edged machete in his right. He glanced at the reinforcements from Earth who had arrived. "You're one step too late." He had already obtained the imitation Infinity Glove and 5 Infinity Raw Stones. Even if the reinforcements arrived, they were still one step too late. "Let me annihilate all of you." Thanos sneered and clenched the imitation Infinity Glove on his left hand. An extremely powerful cosmic pressure rose. Although one raw stone was missing and he couldn't use the cosmic finger snap that could reverse everything, it was more than enough to defeat the reinforcements from Earth. The expressions of Lucy, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and the others all changed. They were about to stop him when they heard a crack. The space next to Thanos suddenly cracked like a mirror. A space hole that allowed people to pass through appeared. Then, a young couple walked out from it, followed by an old man with a hunched back. Faced with this sudden scene, the forces of Thanos and Lucy, who were confronting each other, suddenly became extremely silent. "What spacetime is it this time?" The beautiful woman opened her beautiful eyes wide and looked at the things around her curiously. "There seems to be a war going on here." The old man slowly spat out a sentence. He looked like he was going to die at any time, but looking into his turbid eyes, the terrifying feeling of being able to see through everything, even the 5 generals of Thanos and the members of the Avengers were shocked. You're Caesar. In the team located in the Cal country, Poison Agent Eddie suddenly exclaimed in surprise at the young man among the 3. You're Eddie? Superman's avatar Caesar froze for a moment, then laughed until tears almost fell from his eyes. This is it, I'm finally back. God knows how many spacetime they had traveled through from the X-Men universe and how many different universes they had passed through before they finally returned here by accident. No way, it's really Caesar. The Avengers were surprised. How many years had it been? When Caesar mysteriously disappeared in the Battle of New York, he was still a child. They did not expect him to return as an adult now. These people. Thanos, who was suddenly ignored, narrowed his eyes. Although he did not know who Caesar and the other 2 were, the 3 of them gave him a very dangerous feeling, especially Caesar. The moment he appeared, he got goosebumps. He must use the power of the Infinity Stone to kill them. Thanos held the Infinity Glove tightly, and a power that was close to the laws of the universe spread out. Caesar, stop him! Lucy shouted. A glimmer of light flashed in Caesar's eyes and he approached Thanos at an indescribable speed, but someone was faster than him. Snap! That hand firmly held the left hand wearing the Infinity Glove, making Thanos's hand unable to close again. Why are you in such a hurry? A cold and playful voice sounded. With the force of the 5 fingers, cracks burst out on the imitation Infinity Glove, and there was a terrible and powerful cosmic energy inside it that was constantly escaping, like colorful thunder and lightning. Everyone on the scene widened their eyes and stared at the blonde youth who appeared without warning and stopped Thanos, who was clenching the glove. Who are you? Thanos looked at him in disbelief. Didn't you just say my name? The blonde youth chuckled. So, you are K. Before Thanos could finish his words, the imitation Infinity Glove along with his left hand was directly crushed by the blonde youth. Just when Thanos was still pinning his hopes on the Infinity Stone, with a crack, the Infinity Stone was also crushed by that hand. How is this possible? This was Thanos's last thought, and then he was swallowed by the cosmic light. And the blonde youth was enscathed in the light that was enough to shatter space and time. Looking at the stunned heroes on the scene, Kale looked back and casually greeted them. Everyone, long time no see. Many years later. On the bustling streets of Tianhe City. Kale, is this your real hometown? It doesn't look any different from where we are. No, there doesn't seem to be any superpower users here. Under the envious gazes of the passers-by who had stopped in their tracks, a handsome and tall blonde youth was intimately accompanied by 4 or 5 beautiful women with their own characteristics. They were in a lively discussion. Some people subconsciously took out their phones to take photos, but for some reason, their phones suddenly stopped working. Lucy, Yutong, Lorna, Sakura G. Among them, Yutong was holding a baby boy who looked like he was carved out of jade. Let me carry little Yutong. Lucy smiled and took the baby boy from Yutong's arms. Kale, I want to see that. Lorna took the opportunity to hug Kale's arm and act coquettishly. Looking in the direction she was pointing, he saw a huge poster in a theater. The Avengers 3rd is currently showing. Let's take a look then. Kale smiled helplessly. He couldn't refuse, so he could only bring them into the theater. After selling the tickets in the theater, Kale seemed to have sensed something. He looked at one of the screening rooms, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He pointed. At the same time, in the theater that had just finished showing the Avengers 3rd, everyone else had left. Only a student named Lu Ming was still standing in front of his seat. He was about to leave when a line of fluorescent words suddenly appeared on the screen. Do you want to enter the world of Marvel? Yes/no. Needless to say, no matter how many cycles there was only one answer. Therefore, when Lu Ming saw the problem, he had already made a decision. End of book. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.